What's up, Squid Dude here, and today I have another back to basic video for you on the Clapton Coil. Now I know most of you who are watching my channel, you already know what the Clapton Coil is and how to make it, but I have a whole bunch of new back to basic videos coming out, and they all use this technique, so I thought it was appropriate to go ahead and make a quick little video on it. So for those of you who don't know what the Clapton Coil is, basically what you are doing is you're taking a piece of wire and you're wrapping it around the outside diameter of a much larger wire. This was first done by a guy named Derek Smalls, and his inspiration for it was a guitar string, hence the Clapton Wire or Clapton Coil. So a little bit about the Clapton Coil. The whole idea behind it is by adding that extra smaller wire around the outside, you're adding more surface area. It also acts like a sponge. It can capture more juice more quickly, thus wicking a little bit better, and you get more flavor out of it. So the other thing to think about is density. So if I were to make two Clapton coils and I used 24 gauge for both of their cores, but I wrapped one in 32 gauge and I wrapped the other in 36. If you were to take a cross-section cut through those two, the Clapton wire with the 32 gauge would obviously have more density to it. It would have more material in it. So what that means is that same 24 gauge core has to put more work and put more effort out to heat the 32 gauge. And that's why you'll see a lot of people using 36 and even smaller wire for their Clapton wires, because it does increase performance. However, starting off at 32 gauge is a perfect place to get the hang of it and to learn the technique and get a feel for it. So don't let that discourage you. So we'll go ahead and jump right into it. So for this build, you'll of course need a drill. I have a variation of pliers and wire cutters as well. Of course, you'll need your tweezers and cotton when you're ready to wick this up. But for this build, I'm going to be using 24 gauge Anarchist as the core wire, and I will be using 36 gauge nichrome as the Clapton wire. So the first thing we'll want to do is cut a couple lengths of our core wire and stretch it out and get this ready to start wrapping. Alright, so you'll want to go ahead and take your core wire and mount it into the center of your drill. You want to make sure you have it in there as centered as possible. The length of wire is completely up to you, whatever you're comfortable with. Just know the longer the length of wire, the harder it's going to be, the more it's going to bounce around on you. If you're using a swivel setup, you certainly can do that as well, which I have videos on how to do that on my channel. The other big thing is your Clapton wire, how you hold the spool. So some people who use a swivel setup, they'll hold the spool in their hand. I, in the past, have held it in my hand as well. But you can take a screwdriver or something and stick it through the center and hold it in between your legs as you do it. I do that when I travel. But what I like to do is to take a screwdriver and I'll just mount it into a drill or into a clamp of some sort. And once I get this mounted in here, it doesn't really move on me too much. And I just will go ahead and set this off to the side so it doesn't get any kinks or there's nothing in its way while it rotates off the spool. And then I just will hold the wire up against the core as it's feeding to it. So one of the easiest ways to get this started is you'll just take your Clapton wire, which in this case is 36 gauge, and I'll just feed it into one of the gaps of the drill, or excuse me, of the chuck of the drill. And once you get it in there a little bit, you can go ahead and turn it just to get it to catch. And now you're ready to go. Okay, so when you're about to get going here, there's a couple things to consider. When you're feeding this wire to the core, you want it to be as perpendicular to the core as possible. You don't want to lead it too much, and you certainly don't want to fall behind. And then the tension at which you pull down on this is a feeling you have to figure out. You don't want it to be too tight to where you're pulling down on the core, but you also don't want it to be too loose to where it will double back over itself and you'll have to reverse and you'll have kind of a kink in it. So the idea is to have just enough pressure to force the wire to push itself out, and all you have to do is really just keep your arm moving at the rate at which it's wrapping around it. And this can take a little bit of practice. Also, what I like to do when I hold the wire is I'll actually wrap it around my pinky and index and ring finger, and this allows me to put a little bit of tension on the wire, but I can ease up off of it as well. And then what I'll do is I'll pinch the wire right up against my index finger, the back of my index finger, and then I'm able to use the length or the width of my index finger to hold the unsupported portion of the wire that we're about to wrap. So it can get a little hard right towards the chuck because you're right up against everything, but once you get a little bit away from there, it should be pretty easy and you should just let it wrap itself. And once you reach the end, you'll just want to go ahead and cut off your Clapton wire. I always hold on to it since it's still on the spool, and I'll put tension back onto the spool so my wire doesn't explode off of it. Alright, so once you get your wire made, you want to be very careful with it when you're handling it. That outside Clapton wire can slide up and down the core. So what I like to do with any of my regular Claptons is I'll actually take each end and bend the wire over on itself and crimp it together. That way the Clapton wire is less likely to move around when you go to coil it. So when you actually go to wrap it and make the coil or make the Clapton wrap, it could take a couple times to get used to it, but once you have it down, it's pretty easy. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up like we would wrap any other coil, and we'll mount it and get it vaping. So that's the Clapton coil. Hopefully, if you didn't know what it was or how to do it, now you do. Hopefully this was informative and helpful even to some of you who might already know how to do this. We did a simple one. I used 24 gauge as the core, and we used 36 gauge as the outside Clapton wrap. I believe I did a single coil with 9 wraps around a 3mm ID. This is probably clocking in, I didn't check, but it's probably somewhere around 1 ohm or just below that. So in a dual configuration, this would sit nice around 0.5. And it is, the Clapton coil by itself is a cooler vape as opposed to the fused Clapton and so forth. I would personally like to thank Derek Smalls for coming up with this. When I started building and I came across this idea, it was great, and it helped me in inspiring me with some of the other coils that I created along the way. So big shout out to Derek Smalls. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.